Welcome back to the Creative Edge, everybody. I'm Tom, and we've got my colleague Becky on the podcast as well. Creative Edge podcast that is at the intersection of AI and creative effectiveness. We have industry leading voices from CPG, retail, and AI as we unpack what truly drives creative impact. Today's episode is called Building Brands That Last, the commercial case for creative assets. And we're very excited to be joined by Suzanne Campbell, an exceptional commercial leader with over 20 years of experience driving growth across Amazon, D2C, omnichannel, and physical retail as well. Suzanne's career spans from the merchant floor of Saks and Macy's to senior leadership roles at Johnson and Johnson, and most recently Opella, building and scaling their enterprise e-commerce strategies along the way. She brings a rare end-to-end perspective on how brands grow, compete, and win in today's retail landscape. Suzanne, you've had a pretty impressive journey. Shall we start there? How did you get from the merchant floor to leading enterprise growth?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Really appreciate being here, and thank you to Becky as well. I led growth on both sides of the shelf, which is a bit unique. Both on the retailer organization side and then moving over to global brand portfolios, which frankly, needed digital talent at the time. We're looking for people that had the skill set and were able to transfer. And so that's really how I made the transition. And today I really focus on future-proofing commerce strategies to drive durable, profitable growth within this rapidly evolving ecosystem that we are in today.
Awesome. Yeah, so welcome, Suzanne. We're so happy to have you here. We wanted to spend some time just looking into your wealth of experience. You went from Macy's as a buyer, then on to Johnson and Johnson, and then most recently onto Opella, focusing more on the e-com side of things. I'm sure that all of those roles have got a really special place in your heart, but we wanted to ask you, what was your favourite and sort of best experience? And if so, why?
I think it's hard to pick a favorite, transparently. Each has a very different experience in my own career journey. And I gained different skills in each of those experiences, right? And I think as a merchant, as a buyer, you are an entrepreneur leading businesses, working with brands. I worked with across multiple categories, many different brands, probably upwards of 80 brands during my merchant career. And so those relationships were one of the bright spots for me, as well as really building assortments and engaging with consumers and bringing brand stories to life. I think that is when I think back to my merchant career, that's what I loved about that role. And, being on the CPG side and the brand side has given me an opportunity to be more of a builder of really the engines that drive e-commerce is how I look at it. And, like you mentioned, D2C and, omnichannel and connecting the consumer experience in store with online and really driving that forward is what has really, been a passion for me on this side, and building new capabilities. And like we talked about, future proofing is really where I've had the most impact, I think, on the CPG side, as well as growing and scaling sales, right? Of course, and other KPIs for the business. So two blended experiences. I can't say that I have a favorite though.
How has the role of creative changed, do you think, in driving performance for brands?
Over time, I'd say creative has evolved rather significantly. And historically, when I think back, it was leveraged for storytelling, really. And today has become incredibly comprehensive and really needs to articulate all aspects of an item, including use case and occasion and features and benefits and data points, and everything needs to be articulated super clearly for the shopper. I think of it as evolving from grabbing consumer attention to really now driving purchase decision more holistically. So it's really conversion infrastructure today versus storytelling and imagery in the past.
From your time when you were particularly at Macy's, were there any particular things that you would say separated the brands that performed well and the ones that perhaps didn't perform as well?
Brands that understood articulating usage, occasion, and really lifestyle imagery, right? Inserting product into consumer lifestyle. That humanization was so critical back then, and I think it still resonates today. Like, that's what we see the best brands do today. Not a lot has changed there in terms of the ones that got it early on are still doing it and everyone else is catching on. Let's just put it that way.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Suzanne, but can you think of any brands in particular that kind of stick out to you that at the kind of present moment in time at all?
Present moment, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of beauty brands that do it incredibly well. I'd say Glossier is one of them. Shark Ninja in the home and beauty space does it incredibly well. Nike continues to, so when we think of apparel, Nike, Michael Kors for lifestyle brands, like they really know how to create content that connects with the shopper. So all of those brands, you know, are really awesome at driving the right creative with consumers.
Right, amazing. I just remember when Glossier first opened in Covent Garden, I think everyone just walking around with those bags, and the in-store piece was what everyone was really, really excited about. I never really got it, but there's a reason for that.
I think you did, Tom.
No,
maybe you did.
Yeah.
Well, something resonated, Tom. Something resonated. You remember?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely right. Like I still remember it now. So it definitely resonated. Over the years, kind of going back to that omnichannel piece, you've also led assortment optimization. Could you give a little bit of a kind of synopsis into that and what that involves a little bit and why it's important as well?
Yeah, assortment optimization is really ensuring that what works is what you are driving and standing for as a brand. And certainly there's a lot of different performance metrics that go into what's working. But I think when we talk about creative and how that influences, especially in marketplace environments, I'd say, you know, it really acts as a differentiator to, you know, create assortments that are successful, right? So instead of, you know, really persuading consumers, it's really preventing cart abandonment, if you will. So assortment is important in ensuring that all needs of the consumer are met with the best available options at, you know, any given time, right? That the brand has available to sell.
How much do you think the creative, especially with that assortment optimization as well, actually influences which SKUs succeed?
I think very much it does. And again, very category specific, right? You're talking about maturity of brands and, you know, different use cases. So creative is going to impact assortment and success differently in different categories. But something I learned really early on in my buying career from a well-respected leader, and I'll never forget this really, is that in e-commerce, every item has to stand on its own as saleable on the shelf, right? When you think about it, you know, shopper is not seeing brand footprint or beautiful packaging or shop and shop experience that they might get in, you know, in a retail environment. So the branding is not there. It's up to the item and the hero image to really stand out and drive. And then obviously the content and creative follows. But I think that's not something that everyone thinks about unless they've been potentially a merchant or driving commerce in this particular way.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting actually, because you've obviously got that from being able to see it firsthand from assortment and being able to rely on other sort of SKUs within the portfolio, and then obviously more recently Opella being focused more on e-com and seeing that these brands really have to work on their own. And that sort of leads me on to what is it then when we're focusing on the digital shelf and we don't have the reliance of the assortment, what wins then? And I know you mentioned a little bit about the hero imagery, but I'd like to explore that a little bit further if that's all right.
I think, you know, winning on the digital shelf today is a combination of things, right? So it starts with operational excellence and product availability. I think that's, first and foremost, because rank and visibility are just foundational. Secondly, content needs to align with search in order to earn the click, in order to earn the consumer's attention in the first place. So that's really secondary to availability. And you'd be shocked at how many products are unavailable for various reasons, or buy boxes being lost. And that's number one and forefront. But third, then I would say the usage-driven imagery and benefits that accelerate the decision-making is the third component of winning on the digital shelf. So it's no longer about one of these things. It's about all three working in tandem, I'd say. And, just to add to that, the bar is higher today. Media is only working. This is a bit of a bold statement, but media is working if content and merchandising are strong enough to convert the traffic efficiently. That is, critical. So it's really all three in tandem, I'd say.
How much does the quality of things like hero imagery, when we're thinking about e-com content, how much does that affect performance? Have you seen firsthand comparable examples?
Nowadays, brands are using more data and talking points of it in hero imagery, and really being able to tell more of a holistic story from that single hero image. And so goes back to my point about, especially in a marketplace environment, that hero image is so critical to get right, because it's the one shot that a brand has to capture the shopper and, and gain that click. It's incredibly critical, that hero is, especially today, even more so.
And do you think, in your opinion, that brands have perhaps been or become too reliant on retail media to compensate for perhaps underperforming assets?
I'd say yes and no. Brands haven't necessarily overinvested in media, but they have underinvested in commercially intelligent content, right? Yeah. I'd make that statement. The media is going to get traffic, but the creative then determines whether it compounds or it leaks. That's, I think, just the foundational piece here. And historically, when we think, traffic used to be less expensive, and therefore brands would drive growth through increased investment because it was really the easiest lever that they had at the time, right? But now the tides have changed. Product content needs to work harder than ever for us and for brands. And so I think that there is a big shift that's happening today, where we need the content to work harder, absolutely, because budgets aren't getting bigger and traffic is more expensive. And so it's a different game today.
For decades, media budgets have been somewhat protected and creative budgets have been somewhat scrutinized or trimmed and just cut, basically. Do you think now, over the past few years or so, creative is finally being seen as that growth lever, or is it still being seen as a cost center?
I think the worlds are really blending, and the winning brands are able to blend creative with commerce and marketing, and it's all really coming together operationally. So that's really the future, and that's a whole other podcast and conversation. The lines are blurring, and I think organizations now understand what it takes to win and to have better content that is backed with data and search. Certainly it's evolving for sure.
Yeah, and I guess creative is what's driving that differentiation, right? And that memorability and that performance. And perhaps people have been thinking about it all wrong a little bit, and they do need to focus on those creative budgets. If you did have to defend one purely from a growth perspective, would it be media spend or creative development? Which one do you think wins in that?
So I think it really truly depends on the category and the maturity of the brand. Having worked on both the retail and the brand side, I've seen, the biggest unlock is not necessarily more traffic, but it's respecting the cost of the traffic you've already bought as a brand. So once organizations realize that, the content stops being just creative output and starts becoming more of a commercial infrastructure. So I think that's how I'd answer it.
Yeah.
It's really not one or the other. It's
Okay.
making them work.
And if brands could see or predict attention and visibility before launch, what do you think that would unlock for them? Tying kind of like back into Dragonfly.
I do think that there's a lot of value in being able to have a preliminary read on content and creativity, not just because instinct is useless, but because the investment is finite. The dollars, as we said, are not getting bigger. So quantifying attention, to a particular asset in the way that Dragonfly does really allows organizations to allocate media with more confidence upfront and not delaying with, test and learns. And so I think, the key is really tying attention and back to conversion and margin and not just, engagement.
Yeah, what happens when attention becomes measurable, right? Is getting that data, and because creative conversations are often really subjective and they're driven by taste or hierarchy or gut feel. So when creative impact becomes evidence-based, what happens then, right? When we're leaning on data a little bit more. Do you think over the years, just thinking back, and maybe kind of like over the past 2-3 years as well, do you think, again, this might be category specific, but do you think brands are sometimes too slow to optimize once assets are alive?
I do. I think the majority of brands are probably too slow. And I think this is where AI and tech come in as a way to future-proof brands and really drive that durable, profitable growth that we talked about in the beginning. Like, this is where brands need to adopt the latest tech because it is too slow, frankly. And speed is critical. So I'd say, speed is also something that tech and AI enable us to achieve differently than we could before.
Absolutely. It's something we kind of hear with customers is we don't test because we're going with a piece of content that works. It always works, and it's gone off instinct, but it works. And what we see from customers that are testing is some people are bringing in a tool, say like Dragonfly, testing and then seeing a 2 times volume growth in a category. And you think, what could be possible? Yes, it's working for you now, but what could be possible if all of that content is actually tested? I think then that gives me a little bit of an indication then of how brands go future-proof and what your opinion is going to be then. But what sort of creative capability do you think that brands should build in the next 5 years? And that sort of ties this all back into future-proofing brands.
Almost the most critical creative capability will be building these commercially intelligent creative systems. Brands will need to predict attention, design modular content that adapts across platforms and operates in tight feedback loops for speed. And, between, like we talked about, creative, media, margin, like the winners won't just make great campaigns, but build creative infrastructure that will help to scale profitability. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, profitability and margin. And so I think there's a lot to be said about how organizations are adapting internally to kind of break down the silos and build commercially creative systems.
Yeah. So do you think then that obviously one of the key features of future-proofing is investing in tools and AI, and specifically talking about AI then, do you think that AI supports future-proofing through scalability? Would you say that's sort of one of the sort of key way it supports?
Future-proofing and AI are connected in that AI enables us to continually evolve and provide speed, right? And so adopting these technologies early and then execution speed is really where we're headed. And so, AI is a big part of that and enabling that.
What was sort of the first piece of tech then that you saw from your career that you brought in, particularly if you have any AI examples that really had that sort of future-proofing effect on a business? You got any examples for us?
As a merchant, as a business driver, being able to build really product imagery and hero imagery quickly when you're changing a particular item pack structure, right? So in my world of CPG and the kind of personal care and healthcare products that we sell, one of the strategies has been multi-packs because they have a higher average order value, which makes the unit economics make more sense, especially in e-commerce where you have fulfillment costs and other costs in the model in the P&L. And so being able to create, let's just say, a product bundle and then test it and decide, okay, it's not this combination, but it's that combination. And I used AI, years ago or a couple of years ago to start this process. So I think, that is really beneficial. It's probably not the fanciest and most exciting use case, but it was a way for us to leverage the tech to get speed in terms of building new products and differentiation on marketplaces and different retailers. And so really there's a lot of value in that. And that's just one small example from, kind of a place that we started with it.
Yeah, it's amazing probably for you to be thinking about, you started with that and that's what you remember, and now there's just AI in all different areas and tech in all different areas. Thank you so much. We're going to go on to some fast fire questions at the end.
Okay.
Or now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First one, what is, do you think, the most overrated and most underrated metric in e-com?
Overrated, I'd say isolated ROAS, and underrated contribution margin after media.
One thing that brands are consistently getting wrong on the digital shelf.
I think treating it like a static catalog instead of a conversion engine.
One thing that you're really bullish on right now?
Let's go with commercially intelligent creative.
And if you're advising a CMO tomorrow, what's the one creative shift they need to make now?
So I think it goes back to breaking down the internal walls between creative, commerce, and organizational silos, and really blending more upstream to get the best results. Yeah,
Suzanne, it's been an absolute delight to have you with us today.
Thank you.
I think we've basically, through the conversation, signed you already up for another podcast by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it sounds like it, isn't it? Part 2 coming
Sign yourself up.
I love it.
But it's been a delight chatting to you today.
Me too. Thank you for having me, both of you. I really appreciate it.